Man, have you ever had like one of those days where it was just didn't matter how fast your wheels spun, you were just getting nowhere? That is exactly how I feel this weekend. Welcome to Unbuckled Comics. If you're new, welcome. There's a liability form on the back table next to a container of Scrabble. We have a central Pennsylvania guest. Scrabble is a Pennsylvania delicacy, but if you're curious as to what it is, I'll leave that to you to find out on your own. If you're returning, thank you for your continued support. I am Unbuckled Cape, your host of this comic book reviewing podcast. But today we are talking about a book that I reviewed last week, and I'm going to be talking about it with the writer Scott Beatty. So, another one of our interview episodes. I love our interview episodes. I love this interview episode. We're talking about a comic that found its way onto my What Are You Doing criteria, and that is Robin and Batgirl Year One, the trade paperback including both Robin Year One and Batgirl Year One. But before we head out on patrol, let's gather some intel first. Uh, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or X, I guess, I don't know, YouTube. They are all on linktree/unbuckledcomics.com, linktr.ee, unbuckledcomics.com. That's where you can find all of the social media and YouTubey goodness. I am going to try, I got a couple of things I need to do here today, editing and stuff wise. I am going to try to get the video version of the interview you're about to listen to onto YouTube. I'm going to try to drop it Thursday of this week. So make sure you're checking out YouTube to see if there is any different versions of these videos. For me here at home base at the Cape Cave, as we enter September, going into the second week of September here, this is typically one of the busier months for us. We are prepping to have Bub's second birthday party. A lot of things going on around here. I would like to give a shout out to one of the listeners who has been a steady listener of the show for, well, since the beginning. Jake. Jake and his wife had just adopted their first child. So congratulations to them. Like I said, big things going on in the world of Cape. One of our brigaders welcoming their first child into their home. And yeah, something I've been dabbling in is cleaning and pressing comics. Been trying to figure out how to do that on my own. I actually just finished one yesterday. I took it out from under its weight today, and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm going to try a couple of other, they're worthless comics. Try a couple of them yet, and maybe I'll start doing some of the well, I have a whole stack. I came across the complete run of Venom Lethal Protector, and issue number one on that is pretty rough. All the other ones are pretty decent. I'd like to clean those, and then I don't know, probably just flip them and try to sell them. But something fun. It's kind of mind numbing work, but it's peaceful work. I hate painting, but I know a lot of people like painting, and it's probably for the same reasons therapeutic. You're just kind of I don't know, you're just working away, you're taking a little eraser and scrubbing out some marks and cleaning the covers, and then you take an iron and iron it up. And I actually did that on Discord. I used the voice chat and, which is something I think I continually forget to mention when I mention our link tree. There is a link to our Discord. I know that it was not really working here the other week. I think I got it corrected and we'll try it again. But yeah, if you jump into Discord, you can join our community, submit comments for the episode, join in polls, make suggestion for episodes. We actually just ran a poll here not too long ago. I put up some comics that I am going to have to go out and purchase. They're comics that I want to purchase anyway. But I left it up to the unbuckled brigaders that are in the Discord as to which ones we were going to do, and I pulled all of them from. Let me see. I just want to make sure. Yes, they were all suggested comics. I had The Rise of Ultraman, Zatanna by Paul Dini, The Mask Omnibus, and Terror Inc. and Rise of Ultraman. I actually ran away with it, so I don't know what I'm going to be doing. That'll end up being like November, December ish time. But that's going to be a suggestion made by Fallen Snow Kiku, and she's going to get her episode on that relatively soon. I am also doing a uh, getting ready to read IDW's TMNT Volume 1. I guess it's the TMNT, the IDW collection is the proper way to say that. Get ready to read that. I don't think I'm going to be reading anything for the show this week. I do need to watch a movie, footage. What a weird way to say that. I do need to watch a movie for the show. I am just finishing up, or have finished up, Batman the Long Halloween. And I was going to watch the two-part movie that went along with it, and then you were gonna have end up having like 3 episodes that was just all focused on Long Halloween. I think I'm gonna side against that, and I think I'm gonna give us a review of the Doom that came to Gotham. It's another more horror-based Batman movie, but that way we're not talking about the Long Halloween for 3 weeks in a row. It just didn't feel right, but I am gonna keep our spoopy season rolling with the Doom that came to Gotham, and I actually believe that's the last episode of October. So that is going to be like right around Halloween. For myself, haven't read any comics for myself at all this past week. I'm going to be reading World's Finest Batman and Superman. I want to jump back into that, and then when I'm finished with that, I think I'm going to be reading the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Black, White, and Green, and then I have the 007 books that I want to read, and of course, a ton of other stuff. There's always something good out there to read. As for you guys, speaking of something good, let's get to that interview with Mr. Scott Beatty. All right, welcome to the show with me, Mr. Scott Beatty. Scott, how are you?
I'm good, Logan. How are you?
Doing really good. This is exciting for me. I get to tie in a review with an interview. It's the first time I'm doing this. This is also my first attempt at recording video. Might try to put this out on YouTube. And I'm also talking to someone who is from the same area as I am. You are from the central Pennsylvania area as well.
I am. I grew up in Petersburg, Pennsylvania, in
Okay.
Huntingdon County.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yep. Um, You have been writing for how long?
Um, wow, a long time. Professionally, probably for the last, oh my gosh, I'm going to say close to 35 years at this point.
Oh wow. That's awesome. All comic books, or do you venture into like novels and other things?
I've written comic books. I've written G.I. Joe and Transformers web animation. I have written short stories, superhero encyclopedias. I'm working on a collection of poetry right now, magazine articles, introductions to DC Comics archives. I mean, I'm pretty much all over the place.
Which one of those came first?
Um, if you're asking what came first, I think my first published work was in third grade. I wrote a "Twas the Night Before Christmas" space style for the third grade newspaper at my elementary school. So that was my first foray into sci-fi. It was really bad, super bad,
when
but
you said
it
you
was
said
more
it
than.
was
Go
when
ahead.
you said it was published in the third grade, I'm thinking you had work published like I could go out and buy a book.
No, it was our third grade class newspaper. Our third grade was called Apollo. That was our pod. And my elementary school, like all the pods were named after the various space programs at NASA. So Apollo, and I wrote "Twas the Night Before Christmas" space style. and it was in our third grade newspaper. So there were, I don't know, at least maybe 20 copies made. So I count that as my first official published work for free.
So this is something that you have literally been doing your whole life.
Yeah, I've been in love with stories since I was, you know, since I was a kid, since I could read. I read early, and I was a voracious reader. And I think the natural extension of that was to become a writer of some sort. Um, and that was kind of my career path from college forward.
And you graduated from a local college, and you graduated with a writing degree, correct?
Yeah, I went to Juniata College in Huntingdon County again.
Yep.
It's a small liberal arts college, if nobody knows what it is, but it's a great school, great college, listed in the top 100 small colleges regularly. And then I went to Iowa State University for my master's in creative writing.
Oh, all right. I seen that you went to Juniata College. I did not actually see that you went to Iowa State for a master's degree. Um, you mentioned that as a kid you were big into reading and you read a lot. Does that include the comic books and the superhero stuff?
Yeah, I have vivid memories of watching the Super Friends, first in black and white, and then when we got our first color television, either on a Friday or Saturday, watching the Super Friends in color for the first time. That's like 1974, 75. And I read comic books, but I didn't really get into them voraciously until I was in the hospital in 1977. I had pneumonia and was stuck uh, in in a hospital room for a week, and uh, the the nursing staff got tired of me asking if the toy room had any comic books or anything to read. They only had Highlights magazine, so my dad went to the gift shop and brought me three comic books, and two of them were DC, and one was Richie Rich. So that kind of started my love of comics. I miss seeing Star Wars, so I read them from cover to cover, back to back, forwards, backwards, just to you know, assuage the heartbreak of not seeing Star Wars with my brothers and cousins.
Oh, so you were in the hospital when that was in theater and everyone went to see it. So
Yeah, the first time, and it's funny because my cousin got the action figures, the early bird action figures. I think it was C-3PO, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, maybe Chewbacca or Darth Vader. I'm not sure which, but the first four. And I had no context because I hadn't seen the film until I read the comic book from Marvel. So I didn't know who the characters were or what they were about until uh, I think the second run when it came back to theaters. Like it was just starting out and it had not really become a blockbuster yet. So
so you were into the Star Wars side of it. You mentioned that your father bought you two DC books. You read the Star Wars Marvels. Did you have a preference between DC and Marvel?
DC was my first love. And I think it was just because I knew the Super Friends. I didn't really know the Marvel characters. And I identified with the DC bullet in the upper left hand corner. At the time, Marvel books looked kind of, I don't know. I use the term like second class compared to the DC title. So I loved Batman. And when I was reading at the time, DC published a lot of the 100-page giants like
Oh yeah.
Superman Family, Batman Family, Adventure Comics, World's Finest. And so, for a kid with no money, you know, or very little allowance, those were, I believe, what Mark Wade calls an all-day sucker. It's a book that you can just read all afternoon. So that kind of filled my interest. I was attracted to the Brave and the Bold early on, and that was the Batman team up title, which I'm happy that years later I was able to write the foreword for the third omnibus for the Brave and the Bold that covered a lot of the stories that I read as a kid. But it was a great gateway to the DCU because it was Batman and somebody else, a guest star each and every issue. So I followed that, and I just started picking stuff up. And the DC Digests were also a gateway for me because they introduced me to a lot of Silver Age and Golden Age stories, origin stories, and some of the weirder corners of the DCU, more obscure characters. And again, they were like 95 cents. So, 100 pages or less, or 60 pages for less than a buck.
And I think I think that's something that DC really has going for them. If you get to those more obscure characters, like their B list and C list characters, I think some of them are absolutely fantastic. I really, really like the Demon and the Question and all those lesser known characters. For me, I remember being young and watching the Justice League Unlimited show and seeing all of them. So I can understand where it would have been very attractive to you coming in and seeing them. At what time did you try to enter writing comics professionally, and was it with DC?
It was with DC. Um, I met a couple different artists, professional DC artists, at the Des Moines Comic Con when I was going to school in Iowa for my master's degree. And they suggested contacting Mike Carlin, who was then the executive Superman editor. And I hooked up with an artist, and we put together a proposal for Teen Titans. And at the time, Teen Titans had been canceled. It was between runs, and I think this was pre-Zero Hour. So we did a 10-page story. I put together a proposal, and we sent it off to DC. And this would have been probably 1994, 95, somewhere in there. And Mike Carlin called me at my office and said, "Don't give up your day job," which was, I was crestfallen, obviously. But Mike stayed on the phone with me probably for a good hour and just talked about the state of the industry in the mid 90s. It was going through a real crunch time, as were any of the speculator businesses, baseball cards, comics, etc. They had
Yep.
done all the covers, all the foil covers, the hologram covers, and comics was going through a real big, retraction and a lot of shrinkage. And Mike basically just kind of talked to me for an hour and kind of set me straight that I was that they were laying off people and it wasn't a good time to break in. And he also set me straight in the notion that DC doesn't look at unsolicited submissions. So he said, quote unquote, "I'm returning your proposal unread, but we're using the Atom." And the Atom was one of the new characters that I had decided to put in my iteration of the Teen Titans, which told me that he read my proposal. I mean, he wouldn't have known that had he not read the proposal or at the, looked at the work. So, um, long story short, I kind of bided my time, got through my master's degree, got married, still wanted to break into comics, and eventually I saw an ad in the back of Wizard for a copy editor. Wizard was increasing their staff, so I applied for the job. Drove from the Midwest to Congers, New York, had an interview, and was hired by Wizard. So that was my toe in the door in the comic book industry. I became a copy editor at Wizard, and I took over the toy column and eventually became editor of Toy Fair magazine at its launch. And during that time, I was writing comic book related stories for Wizard, and that got me noticed at DC. And eventually, DC offered me some work on their Secret Files books, uh, mostly based on a travel guide to Gotham City that I had done for Wizard. And I talked to DC editor Darren Vincenzo and just asked for a lot of his feedback and help on it. And I guess he was impressed enough that when the Secret Files were launched, he threw me a bone and offered me some text work. So I wrote timelines, character profiles, and maps and things like that, and that helped to open the door just a little bit. So eventually, I was offered a story in the DCU Holiday Bash, and again for Darren, and I pitched a story involving a supervillain breaking out of the slab on Christmas Eve to visit his family. And Darren liked it enough that he gave me 2 extra pages. So in the book filled with 10-page stories, I had the only 12-page story. And they actually used the villain, Shrapnel, on the cover. He was the dominant cover image with all of the other DC heroes reflected in the facets of his metal face. So, my first official story, 12 pages, and I got the cover. So that's my story of breaking in at DC. And after that, I got little work here and there. Eventually, I quit working for Toy Fair and did it full time as a freelancer. And from there, wrote a lot of stuff for DC, Cross Gen, um, you know, Dynamite Entertainment also, and all over the place. I worked for Hasbro, so it's yeah, that was my origin story.
So, Shrapnel, that's actually a character that I'm familiar with. Is that your character, or is that one that you pulled out of
No,
the?
no. I believe Shrapnel was created by Eric Larson in the
Okay.
pages, and maybe I know he was in the pages of Doom Patrol, but he's a living fragmentation bomb. He's just covered with metal, and he can explode at will. So when I was working on the Holiday Bash, I was told that I couldn't use any of the core characters, and Darren suggested a villain,
Oh.
and so we did it from the villain's perspective, and it's kind of uh, spoiler alert: Shrapnel does break out, visits his family, and goes along quietly when the police show up, but he leaves pieces of his metal body on the Christmas tree as tinsel. So, right in the heart. That's what I was aiming for. And it was based on those old DC holiday stories where, the heroes do something, some kindness on the holidays, just to show that, they believe in, the golden rule and holiday spirit and all that. So I was trying to channel that feeling.
uh, when you do writing for specifically DC, since we're going to talk about Robin and Batgirl, how often are you dictated with characters that you can and can't use for a story?
Um, I think it happens quite a bit in the comics industry. I mean, you certainly can't tread on other people's characters in monthly books if they're using a particular character. I mean, there are some rules. Um, Certainly, you can't change aspects of an established licensed character for the sake of a story sometimes, unless you are of a certain rarefied air, like a Kevin Smith can have Batman say certain things based on his cult of personality and celebrity. But I always examine it from the perspective of I don't own the characters. I'm kind of taking them off the shelf, and when I put them back up on the shelf, they should in some large way resemble the way they were when I took them off. So sometimes you can't use certain characters. When I wrote Joker Last Laugh with Chuck Dixon, we wanted to kill an established DC hero, um, and that would have been kind of the impetus for the heroes to go after the Joker and gloves off and finally end the Joker once and for all. That was kind of our original pitch, and it was accepted. And a funny story: when we pitched it to Mike Carlin, I think it was at the chili factory across the street from DC Comics when they were in Manhattan. At the end of the conversation, after Mike decided to greenlight the story, I said, "Mike, do you remember me?" And he's like, "Well, you're Scott." And I said, "Well, years ago, about probably 8 or 9 years prior, I said, you called me up and told me not to quit my day job." And Mike said, "Well, obviously you didn't listen." So so I finally did get a chance to make it good with Mike. But eventually, as we were working our way through Last Life, it was decided that we couldn't kill this established DC hero, and we also couldn't kill the Joker, and that was kind of the thing that we were going to do. We killed him, but we brought him back in the story. He gets mouth to mouth resuscitation, and he's revived after he's beaten to near death by Nightwing. Um, and we were told you can't kill the Joker because he sells peanut butter. So I find it ironic because not too many years after that, the Joker cut off his own face, I think during Scott Snyder's run, and
Yep.
then reattached it with a belt. And I remember emailing Mike Carlin and saying, "Mike, I thought we can't do stuff like that to the Joker." And I think I got the email equivalent of a shrug. So
I guess what um what I'm trying to figure out is, so let's talk about Robin and Batgirl. Um, Two separate stories, but they came together in a trade. I bought this book and I sat down, and when I started reading it, one of the immediate things that popped out to me was the use of Killer Moth and Firefly.
mhm.
Are those characters like that? Are they of the same area where you were kind of dictated with how you use them, or are they so lower that people don't really care?
Well, at the time they were way way down on the totem pole.
Right.
Um, I think that we used Killer Moth because our intent was to keep Batgirl's origin as close to the comic books as possible. That we had no intention going into it of rewriting the $1 million masquerade ball story from Detective 357. Um, we wanted Killer Moth to kind of rise to the occasion to try to be a better villain. And we were also mindful of stuff that had been done years prior, including things that Chuck had done in Robin, where Killer Moth was one of the villains that Neron tempted with the offer of greater power if they sold their souls to, DC's equivalent of the devil. And so, he became Caraxes, like the giant moth monster. But in our story, he was a big time loser. He wanted to be the Batman of villains and offer the mob and organized crime in the DCU a champion and give them moth signals that they could, attract him at night when he was needed. And it was all pretty lame. And so Firefly was a character that Chuck had brought back in Detective Comics and was itching to tell the origin, his revised origin. And so that was the whole purpose of kind of devoting, I think it was Batgirl Year One number 5, I think, 5 or 6. There was just the issue devoted to
Yep.
Firefly's origin. And we wanted to show that there was somebody really dark. And Killer Moth had kind of, the moth to the flame, had allied himself with a villain who was just off, off the wall, was darker than everyone else, and really dangerous. And so, in a way, we gave Batgirl, a double threat of a villain that was dangerous in his ineptitude, and then a villain who was dangerous because he was mean, and had fire, as his weapon. So that was really the intent there. And of course, with Batgirl, because the format was 9 22-page issues as opposed to Robin Year One, which was 4 48-page issues, I think we had the freedom to have Batgirl and and Robin sometimes go up against other more, I guess, more obscure DC villains, but then in the past, in the present, they had uh, a lot more street cred, like Blockbuster, of course, who is
Right.
Nightwing's major villain in the Nightwing series. So they fight Blockbuster, they fight an early version of the Condiment King. So we liked him enough from the animated series, so we kind of pulled him over into our universe. But for the most part, the through line is Tough Tony Bressie, the Gotham mobster, and Killer Moth and Firefly, and also just the standard threats along the way, including, I think, in many ways, Commissioner Gordon is an antagonist because he's trying to get in the way of Batgirl being Batgirl, and she has to stay one step ahead of her father.
And, and I mentioned this in the review that if you were listening to this in the present, it would have came out the week before. One of my favorite things about this book is using those characters that aren't as mainstream like Blockbuster. And I am a huge Condiment King fan because of the animated series. Uh, Also, the moth drawn to fly or drawn to fire, that whole thing went right over my head. But I also mentioned in my review about the art in this is very light. It's very fun. It's approachable. Um, Firefly's a dark dude. That this whole book kind of takes a twist in that episode in that issue, and I don't remember which one it was, either 5 or 4, where we focus on Firefly's origin. Was there any bit of debate between you and Chuck on how dark you could make this, because of the rest of the book seems very kid friendly, and then you get to how really sick and twisted Firefly is. I mean, he's kind of he wants to watch a video that someone is burning in.
Yeah, I don't think we wrote it for kids in that regard. I think at that point, when we were working on it, DC had their kid titles, like the Batman animated series version of the comic, and maybe Justice
Mhm.
League Unlimited, and the ones that were definitely all ages. I think we were aiming for the T for teen, the mainstream DCU
Yeah,
audience, and certainly, I mean, he's a character that. I know that I'm probably aligned with Chuck in writing that villains are villains. They are bad because they want they want riches without doing any work. They're mean spirited. They're evil. They don't emerge out of trauma. They are trauma. They create trauma. They're the ones who create victims, not the other way around. So the with Firefly, the fact that he was a special effects artist and used too much incendiary gel for the effects and ended up burning the starlet of the film that he was working on. Um, you're like, wow, okay, so he's reckless, but you need that final line where he says, "Did you keep the footage?" That he somehow gets off on the people who are being burned. That makes him dangerous, and I think that's why when we look at the Batman villains, they're not like Arkham crazy. They're dangerous crazy. So you have to. I don't know. We needed a threat that was more than just Killer Moth being kind of a doofus. We needed a we needed a legitimate threat, and I think at a certain point in the series, Killer Moth realizes that he's in way over his head
Oh
with
yeah.
Firefly, and the mob and everything else. That he kind of just wants out, but he's too far gone. So
It brings a really really good balance to the story. Those two paired up together with Killer Moth being the doofus, and then Firefly being as dangerous and reckless as he is, um, as well as the balance on the flop side of Robin and Batgirl, where Robin is really sure in what he's doing, and Batgirl's a little more, apprehensive about some things. Was it planned right off the bat for you to do Robin and Batgirl, or did Robin go well enough that they decided to greenlight a Batgirl year one?
yeah, I think it was column B. We sat down and pitched Robin Year One to DC with the idea that Batman Year One was published in '86, and we came out in 2001. So for 15 years, DC had sort of capitalized on this great seminal look at Batman, and it was one of the first, I think, real big hits that was in constant print. I mean, there were 6 or 7 printings of Batman Year One, and the idea that Chuck and I had is that why didn't DC have a bookshelf full of these? There have been stories, annuals, and stuff like that told a Year One, but why not like have like a regular, serious Year One production plan. So we pitched Robin Year One, and we got to do that as a prestige format. So they were sort of those perfect bound 4 issues, on the glossy paper, and it was a hit. And so we said, okay, well, let's do Batgirl Year One, and it's kind of a thematic follow up. And then down the line, they asked us to do Nightwing. And along the way, we sort of kind of planted the seeds for each next one in the previous. So at the end of Robin Year One, there's the scene on the rooftop at GCPD headquarters where Barbara Gordon shows up. And, for a moment, Commissioner Gordon says, "Not on your life, boy wonder," which is a line that is repeated in all 3 of our Year Ones. Um, and then, of course, in Batgirl, we kind of set up, I think, ultimately what would become Nightwing. It doesn't have the same kind of connection that the previous 2 had, but those 2 were aligned because Javier Polito, who did Robin Year One, and Marcos Martin, who did Batgirl, were friends from Spain, and Marcos did a little pinch hitting on some of the art for Robin Year One. So when we went into Batgirl Year One and knew it was Marcos, we kind of stopped and rewrote the first 2 issues in order to accommodate his style and to let him breathe, because I think we were heavy on exposition to start, and we realized that Marcos could just sing with it. So we backed off and rewrote some action sequences just to let him do his thing.
All right. So we've been talking about you writing with Chuck Dixon. How does that work writing with somebody else?
It's something that I've done rarely, but it's something that has it really works organically with Chuck. I met Chuck way back when I was working for Toy Fair, and the secret origin of that story is that I invited Chuck to go to the International Toy Fair in New York City to see the first Bane action figure from the what was it, Batman and Robin film?
Oh
No,
boy, yeah.
Batman for not Batman
No, that's
Forever.
Batman and Robin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Batman and Robin. Yeah, and so and of course Chuck is a toy aficionado also. So he got to see the first Batman figure and kind of based on Bane, and then write about it for the back of the magazine. And we struck up a friendship and kind of realized that we have similar tastes. And eventually, we co-wrote some stuff together. So it's really a 50-50 split in terms of the writing, but Chuck is way more prolific than I am and faster than me. So I'll write 5 pages in, I don't know, 2 days, and he'll write 5 pages in 2 hours. So the momentum that Chuck brings to anything that we collaborated on was just, I was struggling to keep up. And also, we tried to challenge each other. So we would do things like writing the characters into a corner and kind of challenging the other guy to find their way out. Batman's on a rooftop and he doesn't have a batarang or a jump rope. Go. Um, in previous interviews, I've kind of likened it to an old Strange sports stories from DC, and it's one that I remember from reading as a kid. And in the story, which was written by Denny O'Neil, I believe, this guy is playing tennis with his childhood friend, and they both become major tennis stars. And it defies credibility, so bear with me. So they're playing tennis, and then he realizes that they're not just playing tennis, they're playing tennis with a grenade. And they've got to keep it in the air or it's going to explode. And eventually he notices that his childhood friend isn't sweating. So he must be a robot. So, like just lobbing it back and forth. And finally, I don't know any of the tennis terms. I don't follow tennis. But, he just smashes it back and it explodes. And his friend is, revealed as a robot. And, he wins and he lives. And that's kind of what Strange Sports Stories was. It was just, dumb sports scenarios written by nerds. But in the story, I kind of thought, well, that sort of is the metaphor for how it is, writing with Chuck when he's lobbing a grenade at me and I have to serve it back, and then it comes back to me, and it has that kind of frenetic quality to it. So um, we'll think about the story together, pitch it together, kind of talk about what the story is over the phone or over emails, and then one person will write the first few pages and then we'll send it to the next person and we'll go back and forth so that it's an even split, and along the way we'll rewrite or kind of revise each other, sometimes making some suggestions, and we really played off each other's strengths. I think I'm more of the Easter egg DC lore kind of writer, and Chuck has action sequences kind of ticking off in his head all the time. I mean, he dreams them, and so they're just waiting to find the proper comic. So we kind of found our footing together, and we found a voice that was sort of an amalgam of our two voices. So that's really how it always worked. And the Nightwing Year One Deluxe Edition that just came out about a month ago has 50 additional pages, including our original proposal, where we talked about what we wanted to do, some email content back and forth as we went over what we're going to do in the story, and our script together. So it's sort of like a master class in how we collaborated, and it's really sort of the first time like our process is part of a collection of our work.
Oh, that's really cool. And that came out last month, and you have
Yep.
coming out by the time this episode releases. Actually, it will be on the shelves. The box set for all of the year ones.
Yeah, got it right here. So front cover, back cover, and then I'm not sure if this is upside down or backwards, but all three editions, starting with Robin Year One and Batgirl Year One and Nightwing Year One. So it's a little different. These aren't the deluxe editions. I mean, they're just the trade paperbacks. So if you purchase, the high end deluxe editions in the last 2 years, you're not losing out. I mean, this is the story, but it's the first time that all of the year ones have been on sale at the same time. DC's been really good for the last 20 years, kind of keeping them in print. And they're in 9 different languages across the globe. So,
Holy
but this is the
cow.
first time you can get everything. I know Nightwing Year One has sold out every single time. It's one of the ones that you can spend upwards of like 200 or 250 on eBay for it. Batgirl, I believe, is out of print right now, and I don't know if you can get copies for anything other than used for Robin Year One.
So, going back to when you were told, do not quit your day job, what's it like for you sitting here saying, there's 3 books that I wrote, and for the most part, they're kind of hard to get a hold of, and we're just printing a box set for them?
I can't believe it. I mean, I'm happy. It's really gratifying. I wanted to work in comics, and I found a way to do it, and I was helped and enabled by a lot of people. And I tell the story a lot. I mean, I credit my spouse first and foremost because she's an English professor and writer, and she was the first one to really believe in me and encourage me. And yeah, also when you're working as a freelancer or trying to break into any sort of writing, having somebody with a stable job really helps. So we knew where our rent was coming from because she was a professor. Um, People like Chuck, who believed in me and collaborated with me, editors like Darren Vincenzo, Jordan Gorfinkel in the Batman offices at DC, Bob Greenberger, who's an editor at DC and also kind of the traffic cop at DC and worked with freelancers. And whenever I would visit the offices, he would always ask me what I was working on and kind of walk me around the different editorial offices and introduce me. Steve Corte in the licensed book division gave me my first Batman Ultimate Guide job, which predated, I think, a lot of the Year One. So, first Batman encyclopedia. So many people that kind of gave me a shot, believed in me. Um, and, really, I mean, I feel blessed to have worked in, DC and other places as well. And, had a chance to, even Wizard, like working for Wizard and being part of that. Uh, I think where we are now in terms of the popularity of superheroes, superhero movies, any kind of superhero content streaming, whether it's an anime based on Suicide Squad or The Boys or any of that stuff, I really believe, and I understand now with hindsight that Wizard kind of created that atmosphere for all of this stuff to be accepted culturally. So, kind of, happy to, be a very small part of it.
Um, so on my show, I do a rating system of these comics.
Mhm.
Uh, Batman, Batgirl and Robin Year One, the thick trade, got my What Are You Doing, which is the highest rating I give. It is one of 15 books that I have reviewed that has gotten that. I think I am up to. I have like 73 episodes, so I probably reviewed somewhere around 60 some books. I love this book.
Oh, thank you.
It is one of my, as I turn my head and look to my shelf, um, it is my favorite Robin and or Batgirl centric book. Um, and it's definitely my favorite Bat Family book. I really do enjoy this, but you also wrote it with someone else. So, would you tell us what is your favorite book that you've done that is just a Scott Beatty book?
I had a blast working on Ruse for CrossGen Comics. Um, that's the book I did with Butch Geist, Mike Perkins, and Laura Martin. It's CrossGen. If anybody is familiar with the CrossGen universe, was a kind of a startup company based in Florida. A retired millionaire put it together and wanted to kind of replicate the Marvel bullpen. So the book that I worked on was called Ruse, which was started by Mark Wade and Butch Geist. And when Mark left the company, I took over writing Ruse, and it was kind of a yeah, I guess it's best described as like a Victorian X Files. It's set on a different planet. Master Sleuth and his partner Emma Watson, Emma Watson, excuse me, Emma Bishop. Um, and she has extra normal powers that he's unaware of, and there's gargoyles and dragons and all kinds of weird things and weird mysteries. And the art was gorgeous. It was done as two-page spreads. Every it was just a series of spreads that was written in Marvel style and then illustrated, and I went back and dialogued it. So it was some of the most gratifying. I also had a year and a half run on Batman Gotham Knights. So I got to write Batman solo and do some interesting things with the Bat family, including introducing who Bane's father was with Chuck's blessing. So Chuck had always known who he wanted, what established supervillain uh, has the honor of parenting Bane, and I got to reveal it in my story. Um, yeah, I mean, I've done a lot. I did three different series at Wildstorm. I wrote Gen 13 and Number of the Beast and Wildstorm Revelations, where I got to blow up the Wildstorm universe. Um, and the intent was there to do a crossover that had lasting repercussions and not just return to the status quo. So we created an environment where the universe ended. It was a post-apocalyptic, event, and then the characters had to live in that post-apocalyptic event. So I got to write a lot of stories based on my childhood watching movies like Damnation Alley and Logan's Run, and my favorite book of all time, I Am Legend, and just kind of just work through all those tropes in it. So yeah, I've done a lot of stuff on my own that had just a lot of fun with a lot of one-off stories, just that you know are just fun.
If you could pick one for me to review on the show, what would it be?
Oh gosh, um, a single issue or like a longer run? What's your
Longer run.
preference? Longer run. Um, hmm. I'd love for you to review Son of Vulcan. That's one that's not currently available in digital form. It was a concept that I took to DC about a sidekick who loses his mentor on the first day of training, and the uh, the original idea was for a more um, a brand new concept, but DC asked me to kind of wed the story to the concept of Son of Vulcan, which is one of the Charlton Comics characters that DC purchased, and I kind of just rewrote the whole Son of Vulcan canon and created a new character. I got to work with Karan Grant, who had done Iron Man at Marvel and other great things, and we kind of created just this whole new character, and it's a lot of fun. It's kind of a walk through the DC universe from an outsider's perspective, but we had a lot of fun in 6 issues. The major villains are the White Martians from Grant Morrison's JLA run. And it's one that I've been lobbying for DC to get in digital, either on Comixology or on the DC Infinite website. So it would be nice. I intentionally, at the end of the series, left the character Miguel at the footsteps of Titan's Tower, and then he was picked up by Judd Winnick in his Titans run and put into a coma. And he's shown up elsewhere. I know that he was part of a quick cameo, one of the Suicide Squad one shots around the time of the first film, and he showed up in the Teeny Titans by Art Baltazar, and that stuff. So like he's made some minor cameos throughout the DCU since then. So I'm hoping maybe somebody will keep him alive. But that's one that I had a lot of fun on because I got to just approach the DCU from a brand new character's perspective, and it's one that not many people are aware of.
Yeah, yeah, right. That's actually that sounds like right up my alley. I will definitely be looking to get a hold of that. One of my favorite things to ask my guests on here is for them to recommend a comic that they had done for me to review. So that is definitely going on my list. And believe it or not, we have been on here for 40 minutes. I know I say that every time I do an interview, but it's easy to sit down and talk about this stuff when you're as passionate as you are about it. And well, for you, you've been doing it for so long. So I don't hold you up into a later hour of the night. I want to thank you for coming on and hanging out with me and giving me some insight and backstory into the Robin and Batgirl Year One and your origin story as well.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I always love talking comics. So that's the easiest thing that I can do.
Well, and don't forget for the listeners out there that that box set is available this month, and I would imagine it's going to go relatively quickly. So get out there and get a hold of it. Find yourself another Scott Beatty story, and until next time, guys, get out there and save the world, you bunch of heroes.